You have been told by mainstream wellness culture that executive performance requires aggressive, constant hydration. Following this dogma, you bring a massive container of pure, heavily filtered water to your desk every single morning. You view this jug as the ultimate tool for productivity. You consume liter after liter of plain water throughout the workday, believing you are flushing imaginary toxins from your system, lubricating your physical joints, and optimizing your cellular machinery for deep, uninterrupted cognitive work. You track your fluid intake as if it were a metric of high performance.
You believe this volume-based hydration is the ultimate health protocol. You are mathematically and biologically incorrect. The volume of liquid you consume does not equate to the hydration of your tissues.
Let us examine the clinical reality of your daily workday. Despite consuming excessive amounts of purified water, your workflow is fundamentally broken. You are constantly forced to break your cognitive focus to walk to the bathroom, shattering your momentum. You are urinating completely clear fluid every 45 minutes. This is not a sign of optimal health. It is a symptom of systemic rejection. Your body is aggressively rejecting the unmineralized fluid you are forcing into it because it simply cannot absorb it.
And most importantly, despite being fully physically saturated with water, you still experience a severe, inescapable wave of brain fog by early afternoon. Your attention span fractures. You incorrectly assume you simply need to drink even more plain water to clear the fog. You assume your brain is just a dry, organic sponge, waiting passively to absorb the moisture you pour down your throat.
But clinical neuroscience does not operate on the primitive logic of sponges. Your cognitive architecture is infinitely more complex. The human brain is not a mechanical filter. It is a highly volatile, highly calibrated electrical generator. Every memory you retrieve, every sentence you type, and every problem you solve is an electrical event. And by flooding this highly sensitive electrical generator with excessive amounts of plain, unmineralized water, you are not hydrating your cognitive architecture. You are actively destroying its capacity to conduct a charge. You are literally short-circuiting your own biological hardware. To reclaim your focus and eliminate the afternoon brain fog, you must completely abandon the gallon myth and understand the exact mathematical reality of how a human thought is actually generated. To understand the mechanics of this catastrophic biological failure, we must isolate the fundamental computational unit of human cognition, the neuron. When you attempt to execute a complex task, when you write a line of code, calculate a financial projection, or construct a strategic argument, your neurons must communicate with each other across microscopic gaps called synapses. This highly sophisticated communication is not driven by water pressure. It is driven by raw, measurable electricity. In clinical neurobiology, this specific electrical discharge is mathematically defined as an action potential. It is the absolute binary code of your brain.
But human biology does not contain copper wires. We do not plug our nervous systems into a wall socket to recharge. Your body must mathematically synthesize this electrical charge entirely from scratch, billions of times per second, using raw chemical elements. And to generate this vital electricity, your brain relies exclusively on a highly precise, highly regulated concentration of positively and negatively charged ions constantly moving across the cell membrane.
These charged ions are known clinically as electrolytes, specifically sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride. They are the physical conductors of your neurobiology. of these essential elements, sodium is the absolute, undisputed master conductor of your central nervous system. It is the king of the extracellular fluid. It carries a positive electrical charge that is mathematically mandatory for the initiation of every single thought you have ever had. Without sodium, the electrical spark is biologically impossible to generate.
If there is an insufficient concentration of sodium outside the walls of your neurons, the electrical voltage gradient completely collapses. The spark cannot ignite. The data simply cannot be transmitted across the network. You experience this silent electrical failure as a cognitive misfire. It manifests as a sudden inability to remember a specific word, a frustrating lapse in concentration during a meeting, a dense, impenetrable wave of brain fog.
The electricity of your brain strictly requires salt. And yet you are aggressively, continually flushing your entire biological system with plain, unmineralized liquid that contains zero conductivity.
You are actively destroying the very electrical gradient you rely on to do your job. You are washing away your own cognitive bandwidth.
To truly comprehend the severity of this self-sabotage, we must look much deeper at the microscopic mechanical engines that continuously power your cognition. Embedded directly in the lipid bilayer membrane of every single cell in your body, particularly concentrated in your neurons, is a remarkable biological machine called the Sodium-Potassium Pump. This pump operates flawlessly, 24 hours a day, burning ATP to function. It mathematically forces 3 positive sodium ions out of the cell, whilst pulling only 2 positive potassium ions inside. Because it continuously pumps out more positive electrical charge than it pulls in, it intentionally creates a severe electrical imbalance. The inside of the neuron becomes highly negatively charged compared to the outside environment.
This imbalance is not a biological mistake. It is a biological coil. It is a microscopic spring loaded with immense electrical tension, waiting patiently to be unleashed. When you need to focus, the voltage gates snap open. The positively charged sodium rushes violently back into the negative interior, and the electrical charge fires the action potential.
This single microscopic mechanism is so vital to human survival that powering these specific pumps consumes up to 20% of all the metabolic calories you eat in a single day. Your body enthusiastically devotes a massive chunk of its daily metabolic output solely to maintaining this delicate, highly volatile balance of salt and water.
And then, against all evolutionary design, you introduce a massive, unnatural influx of pure, filtered water with absolutely zero mineral content. The delicate, carefully engineered concentration of sodium outside the neuron is instantly disrupted and severely diluted. The pump physically cannot find enough sodium to maintain the electrical gradient. The biological spring entirely loses its tension. The action potential fails to fire. Your cognitive bandwidth mathematically plummets because the electrical grid has failed. Every single thought, every executive decision, and every long-term memory retrieval now requires double the biological effort to execute. You have successfully hydrated your stomach while simultaneously starving your brain's electrical grid.
But the damage does not stop at the electrical level. The physical, structural architecture of your brain cells is now under severe, immediate threat.
In clinical neurobiology, water does not simply flow wherever it wants to go. It is strictly, mathematically governed by the laws of osmosis. Osmosis dictates that water will always move mathematically toward the highest concentration of solutes, specifically toward the highest concentration of salt.
Water follows salt. It crosses the cellular barriers to achieve equilibrium. This is an unbreakable biological law. When you drink a gallon of plain, purified water, it enters your gastrointestinal tract and rapidly absorbs into your bloodstream. Because it contains absolutely no minerals, it mathematically dilutes the baseline sodium levels in your blood. Your blood plasma is now severely diluted and hypoosmolar, but the inside of your brain cells still retains a normal, highly concentrated volume of salt. Obeying the absolute laws of osmosis, the massive surplus of plain water in your bloodstream rushes violently through the aquaporin channels directly into your brain cells, desperately attempting to equalize the salt concentration. The microscopic cells in your prefrontal cortex literally begin to swell with excess water. They physically engorge. In extreme clinical cases, this systemic dilution is known as hyponatremia, leading to severe brain swelling, seizures, and even death.
You're likely not drinking enough to induce a fatal biological event at your desk. But you are drinking exactly enough plain water to induce a mild, chronic, highly destructive state of cellular edema. Your brain is encased in a rigid, fixed bone structure, your skull. It has absolutely no room to expand. When the neurons swell even slightly from the water influx, it creates constant microscopic intracranial pressure.
This mechanical pressure physically distorts the neural pathways, further paralyzing the fragile electrical action potentials we discussed earlier. The hardware is physically warped. That heavy, dull, lethargic ache behind your eyes in the middle of the afternoon, that severe inability to process complex data or maintain your train of thought, that is not a lack of caffeine. That is not a lack of sleep. That is mild, safe-induced hyponatremia.
You are mathematically drowning your executive function in a relentless flood of unmineralized fluid.
To optimize your cognitive architecture, you must completely and fundamentally rewrite the way you consume liquids.
You cannot architect a high-performance life on a diluted, failing electrical grid. You must execute the hyperhydration protocol. You must transition entirely from plain volume water consumption to strict mathematical electrolyte saturation.
For every liter of water you consume, you must mathematically bind it to a high-quality mineral matrix. You must introduce a minimum of 1,000 milligrams of high-quality sodium, alongside the precise appropriate ratios of potassium and magnesium. When you consume heavily mineralized water, the fluid is no longer a biological threat to your osmolarity. It transforms into an electrical payload. The unyielding laws of osmosis are satisfied. Because the fluid contains salt, the sodium concentration in your blood plasma remains perfectly, identically calibrated with your intracellular fluid. The cellular edema vanishes. The excess water is pulled out of the brain tissue. The microscopic, throbbing pressure inside your skull is instantly relieved.
And most importantly, your microscopic sodium-potassium pumps are flooded with the exact raw chemical materials they require to build immense electrical tension. The biological springs are wound tight. The action potentials fire with absolute, frictionless velocity across your synapses.
Your cognitive bandwidth is mathematically restored. Your afternoon brain fog is eliminated entirely. And your trips to the bathroom are cut in half because your cells are actually absorbing and utilizing the fluid. You have successfully saturated your electrical grid, relieved your intracranial pressure, and secured your elite cognitive output. But none of this neurological optimization matters if the artificial lighting in your corporate office is actively manipulating your cortisol levels and violently destroying your circadian alignment. Click here to discover the exact neurobiology of the Lux trap and learn why modern overhead LED lighting is mathematically signaling to your primitive brain that you are under constant, inescapable biological attack.